Hi there, Nigel Saunders here. Today is the last day I can work on my trees before our club show. I've been doing well this week. I've got 8 trees worked on out of the 15 that I want to put in the show. Today I'll be zipping through the last 7 trees here in the bonsai zone. I'll start today with a splash of color with my Bougainvillea pink Pixie bonsai. The tree has some flowers on it. Not as many as I'd hoped for, but it has some, so that's good. Bougainvillea's flower on the new shoots, so I've allowed it to grow, and I've got a lot of flowers forming, but I will prune back these new shoots to the sections with the flower before the show. So here I go. Pruning has got the height back in check for the tree. I want to go in now and clean out. There's a lot of dead leaves in here. You can see a yellow leaf. So I just want to clean them out. Make sure all the leaves are nice and healthy looking. I'll come in with the tweezers and just pick out the leaves that have died back on the interior, like that. Some more in here. On this side there's some old faded flowers I can pick out here. This one's fallen off. Hopefully all these flowers won't fall off before the show. You never know, on the car ride down sometimes flowers fall off your trees. But I'm sure there'll be some on it. Still some dead leaves I'm getting from the inside here. The interior of the tree. Because we had such a warm, humid summer, you can see aerial roots growing from the trunk of the tree. I do the shake test where you just shake your tree, and I did lose a lot of flowers, fell off, but they would have fallen off in the car ride anyway, so this is what I'm left with. It still looks quite nice. I'll clean up the root base of the tree now, removing the moss around the base of the trunk so you can see the surface roots. This tree does have a nice root base on it. I've been working on the roots ever since I got it as a small cutting, and it's starting to get some nice flare at the base of the trunk now. I'm coming in with the toothbrush now and just trying to get all this moss off the roots. That's looking much better. As the base of the tree dries, it should lighten up the bark and it should change the same color as the trunk up here. I will do a little moss pruning just to make a more of a gradual transition between the moss and the base of the tree. Just pruning off some of these longer bits. Back here is quite long. I've got a little bit of white around the lip of the pot that I'll have to clean up also. So I'll give the edge of the pot a rub with some steel wool. That does a good job. That gets it nice and clean. This is just fertilizer. I use rainwater so I don't get lime buildup. So it's just, you know, excess fertilizer drying on the surface of the pot there. So that looks good and clean. I'll press my moss back down that I disturbed. Just clean up the front face of the pot a bit too. And that looks good. The pink Pixie Bougainvillea is all cleaned up and ready for the show. On to tree number 2 for today. My next tree for today is my bird's nest spruce, and we'll be sprucing it up. Both the moss and the sedum has grown really long and lush, so I'll be pruning it back, especially from the lip of the pot. I may have to leave the moss a little longer than I normally would. I can't prune it back too far today, but definitely I'll have to prune this sedum back. So here I go. Ideally, I would have done this like a week ago, so it doesn't look like it was just pruned, but I'm just running out of time, as usual. Some of this sedum I can just pull out. It's growing too close to the trunk here. Break it into smaller bushes so it doesn't look like one big clump. Prune it back from the lip of the pot here so it's not overhanging the lip. There's a stone in there, you can't even see it, it's just covered up. I'll get this pruned to a rounded little bush. I'll clean up the moss that's overhanging the lip of the pot now, so I'll just prune it away. Like that. Get the corner here. To get rid of that edge that I just cut, again, I just push the moss down that covers that cut line, and it all looks nice and natural. I have a lot of moss around the base of the tree that I'll have to clean up also. This tree doesn't have the greatest root base in the world, but I work on it, and I'm trying to improve it. And slowly it's getting better. Coniferous trees, you have to be a little more careful about root pruning than some of your tropical and deciduous trees. But over the years, the root base has been getting better. There's another root in here that I'm slowly uncovering. That's looking better now. Some stones here that are hidden by the moss. I don't want to completely cover those up. I'll get out the toothbrush now and see if we can get this cleaned up a little better. That's looking much better. I'll get this sedum at the back pruned down also. Way too tall. Alright, I think I'd better prune some of the moss down now. So I can't take a lot off or I'll lose the nice green color, but I can do a little bit. The moss is a nice scale for creating bushes, but I don't want it all even across the front. So I'm going to pull some tufts of moss out and I'll replace it with sand or something. Especially at the front here so you can, view the base of the tree more. Break this clump up, pull the middle section of that out. Like that. And pull this clump out, which was growing over top of a rock. The back isn't too bad. I do need to separate this a bit. I'll pull some moss out of here. That's looking better. Looks more like a landscape now, rather than just all moss. I'll add the sand now. Sand got a little wet last night. That's okay though. Okay. Now I'll give it a water to settle all the sand down. Here I go with the water. That's starting to level the sand out quite nicely. I think that'll do. My bird's nest spruce is all spruced up. I think the landscape looks much more realistic and miniature. My next tree is not a tree at all, but a tree-shaped plant. This is my Asparagus Fern. Over the years, I've just kept raising it up in the soil level to expose the roots, which form the trunk, and shaping the canopy to look like a tree. One thing I found very funny is that some clever squirrel has hidden a walnut inside the branches here. Can you see that? I saw one on my bench the one day and I wondered what he was doing. So now I know. Hiding a walnut. The Asparagus Fern is really easy to grow as a bonsai. It's easy to care for, it can survive drought, it can survive low light. It's a really tough plant to kill. Since the last video on this tree, it's put on a lot of new growth. You can see the new shoots coming up here. It's really filled in that bald spot at the top here. Some really nice growth. So I'm really happy about that. It's definitely in good shape for the show. I will prune it today to get it all kind of stylized to look more like a tree. I found the best way to prune the Asparagus Fern is to just trim it like a hedge. So you just come in and make a nice rounded canopy on top. Next, I'll come in and prune some of these lower branches. So that one can come completely off. It's a nice branch, but it's too low. Take some of these back ones off. Some of these hanging branches can come off. On this side, I can remove some of these back branches. Trim these ones back. I think I'll try and round the canopy more. I finished the pruning on the canopy and it looks much better to me. It still looks rough enough that it doesn't look like a perfect dome, so it looks very natural. If you prune them too much to a nice symmetrical rounded shape, they tend to look a little artificial. The humid weather we've had lately has caused a lot of new roots to drop down, some aerial roots, which looks really good. If you can see the white roots in here. Yeah, it really helps thicken up the trunk. There is a nice natural layer of moss starting to form on the surface of the soil. So I'm not going to add any more moss. I'll just clean up the surface, removing any debris, any white pieces of perlite that look obvious, and that'll be it. Even though this isn't a tree, it is one of my favorite plants I have in my bonsai collection. It just keeps getting better every year. I never thought I would like an asparagus fern. I finished cleaning up the asparagus fern, tree number 3 for today. Let's go in and have a look. I'll put the asparagus fern back on the bench and we'll get out tree number 4 for today. Tree number 4 is my Austrian pine. Many of the branches are shedding their needles from 2 or 3 years ago. So you can see they're kind of yellow and you can pull them out like that. So I've got to go in to all the branches and just give that a light pull to get all those yellowy needles out of the branches. There's not a whole lot, but definitely some in here. To get rid of any needles that are laying on top, I just give the tree a brush. It gets rid of all those needles just sitting there. The only remaining work to do on the tree is to clean up the moss around the root base. I won't be doing a lot of work here, just cleaning up a bit of the moss to expose the roots a little more. I don't want them totally covered up. Alright, I'll just get these needles plucked out of here. There's a few weeds in here I've got to pull. It's starting to look like the ancient root base of an old growth pine. There's a couple of places on the surface here where the birds have kicked away the moss. So I'm going to add some sand in those areas and then water it to blend it in. And I think that'll look really good. Alright, here I go. Add a bit of sand there, some in the back corner here. A bit around the root base here. Here, 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 and here. Okay, I'll get the watering can out, give it a water. And that should do it. The Austrian pine is all cleaned up and ready for the show. It's time to get out tree number 5. Tree number 5 is my little Ficus Religiosa. I think I've taken too good a care of this tree. The leaves have come in nice and green and lush. Not very miniature at all. You can see the roots have grown out the bottom drainage holes and we're growing across the table in the greenhouse. I'll be displaying this tree with Wally because this tree looks like the one in the movie. During the credits of the movie, the tree gets planted in the ground and grows into a giant tree. I'll start the work today by pruning off these roots from the bottom of the pot. I'm sure they'll grow again, but we'll get rid of them for now. That should do. I'm going to leave the moss as is. It looks really nice and fluffy. I'll start the work on the tree by removing the largest leaves. I'll prune this branch back. I think I'll have to take all the leaves off. Just looks too big and coarse and out of scale, so I'll take them all off. Like that. Maybe leave these two little ones. I'll prune these branches back. I'm going to prune this one back to here. And this one to here. And I'll leave that one longer. Actually, I'll prune this one back to here. It'll take that leaf off, but oh no, it didn't. I think that'll do. That's enough leaves that you can tell the tree's alive. Okay, let's give Wally his tree back. So I'll set it on the stones here. And I think that'll do. I'm putting this tree in the show just because it's an unusual science fiction movie style display. My larch forest was to be tree number 6. However, I've decided not to put it in the show this year, and I'll explain why. My plan for next year's show is to have 15 different trees in the show. I'm putting my avatar grove into the show this year, which is a large forest in a large pot. And my large forest is a very similar planting. So I'm going to show my avatar grove this year, and then next year I'll show my large forest. It's quite often with small clubs that their show can look the same every year, the same trees, year after year. So I want to save 15 trees for next year so that it keeps people coming back so they don't see the same trees year after year. My last tree for the show is my Ficus microcarpa that I've grown from a seed. Because the canopy is slowly getting more dense, I'm starting to get some aerial roots growing down from the upper part of the canopy, and someday they'll grow down and reach the ground. My favorite roots are the kind that grow along the trunk. They look really nice. They grip the trunk, and as they thicken, they just look fantastic. The canopy on this tree is also developing nicely. It'll take many years before it's more refined and better looking, but it's a good start. There's just a little bit of moss I'm going to pick off the roots here. Not very much, just in a few places. Just to clean it up a little bit. I don't want to disturb any of the roots that are growing. Next, I'll clean up the roots growing out from underneath the pot, out the drainage holes. Okay, I think that's good. Here's an example of some of the roots growing near the base of the tree that are gripping the trunk. They look really natural, really how a tree grows in nature. These roots gripping the trunk, because the trunk is usually a wet surface due to the bark. So they kind of travel along the wet surface of the trunk and then grow into the ground. So I really like those roots. They're hard to duplicate any other way than just growing them naturally. Next, I'll do some cleanup work on the canopy. These roots growing along the surface of the soil will look really good as they thicken up too. They have natural movement to them as they creep along the ground. And yeah, it'll make a really nice root base on this tree as they slowly mature. That's the last of my work to the show trees for this year. I'll be loading them in the car tonight, so they're all ready to take to the show tomorrow morning. Well, I managed to get all my trees ready for the show. So that's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me here today in the Bonsai Zone.